The morning I opened my eyes to the sound of a black hornbill calling from the top of the kapok tree, I did not know it was the last peaceful morning our forest would ever know. My name is Kael. I'm 17 years old, and I have never seen a road. I have never touched a telephone. But I know how to read the jungle the way you read a book. Every broken branch, every silence between birds, every shift in the smell of the air tells a story. My father taught me that. His father taught him. And for generations, the Orang people have lived inside this forest the way a heart lives inside a chest. Quietly, completely, and without it, we cannot survive. We are maybe 240 people. We live in longhouses raised on wooden stilts above the wet ground. Our children learn to swim before they walk. Our women weave baskets so tight they hold water. Our hunters can hold their breath underwater for 3 minutes, waiting for river fish. We are not primitive. We are precise. Everything we do has a reason. Nothing is wasted. That morning, my younger sister Mira was already awake, grinding cassava with my grandmother, Dama, whose hands moved slow and sure like they always had, like time itself had agreed to move gently around her. My father, Ranu, was sharpening his blowpipe darts with the spine of a palm leaf, his eyes half closed, but his hands perfect. My mother had been gone 6 years, taken by a fever the forest could not cure, and since then, my father had become both parents at once. He was hard when he needed to be, and soft in the moments that mattered. I want you to understand what our mornings looked like, because what came later makes no sense unless you first understand what was worth protecting. The children chased monitor lizards away from the cooking fire. Old men told stories about the Great Flood 40 years ago, when the river swallowed 3 of our longhouses, and the tribe moved 3 miles deeper into the forest and rebuilt in 1 week. Women painted their arms with indigo paste in the old patterns, diamonds and river spirals that meant things. This woman is a healer. This one has lost a child. This one is waiting for love. There was grief in those patterns. There was history. There was identity. And there was danger too, of course. The forest is not kind. It is beautiful and honest, which means it shows you exactly how strong you must be to survive inside it. I had seen my uncle bitten by a Russell's viper when I was 9. I watched my father cut the wound open with a stone blade, suck out the poison with his own mouth, and pack the hole with crushed neem leaves and red clay. My uncle lived. But I watched my father walk into the trees afterward and sit alone for a long time. I think he was afraid. I think he needed the jungle to hold him the way it always did. The greatest danger we faced every season was the black leopard we called Seku, Shadow. He had killed 2 of our dogs, and once came close enough to the longhouse that we could hear him breathing in the dark. My father said never to run from Seku. He said the leopard tests your fear. If you run, you become prey. If you stand still and hold your ground, you become something else, something the leopard must respect. I didn't fully understand what he meant until the men with machines arrived. It started with sound before sight, the way danger usually does in the jungle. A low vibration, like thunder but wrong, too steady, too mechanical, too patient. The birds heard it first. The hornbills went silent. A troop of proboscis monkeys screamed from the canopy and scattered north. I was out checking our fish traps at the river bend when I felt it in the soles of my feet, coming through the ground. I ran back to camp. By the time I arrived, the elders were already gathered around my father in the center of our clearing. 3 of our best trackers, Doro, Pati, and my cousin Mace, had returned from the eastern edge of our territory, with news that made the air feel heavy. "Yellow machines," Doro said, still catching his breath. 6 of them, big as houses, cutting the trees at the river fork. My father did not move for a moment. Then he looked at me. I don't know why. Maybe because I was the oldest child and he wanted me to hear this clearly. "How many men?" he asked. 30. Maybe more. They have guns. They They have a man in a white shirt who talks on a black box. A satellite phone. I had seen pictures of these things. One of the younger women in our tribe, Sela, had been taken to the city by missionaries when she was a child, and returned to us 5 years later with a notebook full of drawings. She had drawn phones, cars, buildings. She was the only one among us who could speak both languages, ours and theirs. My father sent for Sela immediately. She came quickly, her face already tight with worry. She had known this day would come. She had told us about it years ago, about the companies that buy land from governments without ever asking the people who live on that land, about the palm oil plantations that replace 1,000-year-old trees with single crops that exhaust the earth in 10 years and leave behind nothing but dust. They will not stop unless someone stops them, she said quietly. And stopping them is not simple. They have papers. They have authority. They believe the law is on their side. Is it? My father asked. Sela was quiet for too long. The law says this forest belongs to the state. The state sold the timber rights to a company called Veron Agri. They are allowed to clear-cut everything east of the river fork. She paused. But there is another law, an international law, indigenous land rights. If we can prove we have lived here for generations, they cannot touch us. She looked at my father. But we would need someone on the outside to help us, someone who understands their world. No one spoke. Then, my father said, go back and watch them. Learn what you can. Don't let them see you. The man in the white shirt was named Daniel Marsh. I learned his name 3 days later when our scouts followed him to the supply camp, and Sela listened to his satellite phone calls from close enough to hear both sides. He was not a bad man. That was the confusing part. He was tired. He spoke to someone he called Sarah every evening, who from the sound of things was his daughter, and he told her he would be home for her birthday. He sounded like someone who had made a decision he wasn't entirely comfortable with, but had decided to live with it anyway, which, I've come to understand, is how most damage in this world gets done. I was the one who first made contact with him. It was not planned. I had followed him alone one afternoon, when he separated from the others, to sketch something in a notebook near the river. I stepped on a dry branch. He spun around, and we stared at each other across 10 feet of silence. He was maybe 40 years old, sunburned. He had kind eyes, which surprised me, and then I felt angry at myself for being surprised. He did not reach for the radio on his belt. He raised both hands slowly instead, palms out, the way you show an animal you carry no weapon. I don't know if he knew that was the right thing to do, or if instinct gave it to him. I didn't run. I thought of Seku, the black leopard. I thought of what my father said. Stand your ground. Become something the danger must respect. We stood there for a long time. Then he pointed to himself and said, Daniel. I pointed to myself. Kale. He nodded slowly, like I had said something important. Over the next 2 weeks, we met 6 more times, always near the river. Sela came with me after the 3rd meeting, translating in careful halves, watching his face for dishonesty. I watched his hands. My father had taught me that hands tell the truth, even when mouths don't. Daniel's hands were restless when he talked about the company, still when he talked about the forest. One afternoon, he walked with us deeper into the trees, and I watched him change. His shoulders dropped. His breathing slowed. He stopped talking and just looked up at the light breaking through the canopy, like it was something he hadn't seen since he was a child. I grew up near a forest, he said quietly, in Oregon. Most of it's gone now. Why? Sela asked. He was quiet for a long time. Because no one stopped it. That was the moment. I felt it shift in him like a tide. But I also learned something else during those 2 weeks that broke something open inside my chest. One of our own men, Patti, one of our best trackers, one of the men I had grown up beside, had been meeting secretly with the company's local liaison, accepting money, sharing information about our movements, our numbers, the locations of our hidden paths. My father discovered this the night Pati came back with new boots that none of us had seen him buy. My father did not punish him with anger. He sat Pati down in front of the entire tribe and asked one question. What did they promise you? Pati wept. He had a daughter who was sick. He needed medicine the forest couldn't provide. He had been desperate in a way none of us had seen, because he had been too proud to ask for help. My father sat with him a long time in silence. Then he said, "You should have asked us." He said it so gently that Pati wept harder. We got the medicine for Pati's daughter by sending Sela to the nearest village the following morning. That was all it took. Community. The thing Pati had forgotten, we were. The machines started moving again on a Tuesday. I know because Daniel sent word through a young worker who had befriended Salah. The company had been given a 24-hour final clearance notice. If they did not begin cutting by morning, they would lose their contract window. That night, my father made a decision that I did not understand at first. He did not pick up a weapon. He called every man and woman and child in our tribe together in the firelight, and he told them to dress in their full ceremonial markings: the white and red clay, the hornbill feathers, the old hand-woven cloth that we only wore at funerals and at celebrations of life, because, he said, those two things are often the same. We will stand between the machines and the trees, he said. Not with spears, with presence. Let them see exactly what they are choosing to destroy. Some of the men argued. They wanted to fight. My father shook his head. If we fight with hands, we lose. If we fight with who we are, we have a chance. At dawn, 237 orang people walked in one long line to the eastern edge of the forest and stood facing the machines. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing I have ever seen. Daniel was standing with the foreman when we emerged from the trees. I watched his face change completely. He stood very still for a long moment, looking at us, at my grandmother Dama, standing straight-backed with her indigo hands, at the children who held their mother's hands, but did not hide behind them, at my father at the front, with his chin up and his eyes clear. Then Daniel walked to the foreman and said something I couldn't hear. The foreman shook his head, raised his radio. Daniel took the radio from his hand, very calmly, and held it at his side. What happened next was that Daniel Marsh, Senior Land Assessment Officer for Veron Agri, called the International Human Rights Organization that Sela had secretly been in contact with for 2 weeks, gave them his exact location and his company's contract documents, which he had photographed on his phone, and reported that his company was in violation of ILO Convention 169 on indigenous land rights. He had known about the convention for 4 days. Sela had told him. He had spent those 4 days deciding whether to use it. The machine stopped before noon. The legal process took 8 months. There were 3 men in suits who came to our forest and asked us questions through translators. My father answered everyone with patience. Sela provided documented genealogy going back 4 generations. I drew a map of our territory from memory that covered 11 large pages. Daniel testified on our behalf. He lost his job. He knew he would lose it when he made the call. He came back to visit us once, 6 months after the ruling was handed down and the land protection order was legally sealed. He came alone, carrying a small bag and looking thinner than before, but somehow lighter. My father welcomed him with a ceremony we give only to those we consider family. At the fire that night, Daniel asked my father how he had known to stand without weapons. My father thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "There is a leopard in this forest. He has tested us many times. I taught my son, if you run, you become prey. If you stand, you become something the danger must respect." He looked at Daniel across the fire. I think that is true everywhere, not just in jungles. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked at the fire for a while. I have a daughter, he said. I've been thinking about what I want to teach her. Teach her to stand, my father said simply. The forest is still here. The machines are gone. The trees at the river fork that were cut, 11 of them, we have replanted with saplings that my sister Mira tends every morning the way our grandmother tended her garden. Patty's daughter recovered fully. She is learning to weave. Sella now works part-time with an indigenous rights organization, traveling occasionally to the city, always returning. She says she carries the forest inside her like a compass. No matter where she goes, she knows which way is home. I think about Daniel sometimes, about what it cost him to do the right thing and how he did it anyway. I think about Patty and how desperation can make even the people we trust lose their way, and how forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. It is the decision to keep someone inside the circle rather than put them outside it. My father told me once that the jungle teaches the same lessons as people, if you are patient enough to listen. Every plant fights for light. Every creature protects what it loves. Everything that is cut down leaves space, and in that space, if the soil is still good, something new will grow. The soil is still good here. The birds came back to the river fork. Last week, I heard Seku, the black leopard, moving through the trees north of our camp, his breath low and steady in the dark. I did not run. I stood still and listened, and felt the forest breathe around me, and I thought, we are still here. All of us, still here.